Hi, Julie. I am so excited to have you. And how appropriate. You have your Oceanside Unified School District logo right behind you. You are the sitting superintendent, reaching about 5 years. But in total, you've been leading in the superintendency for 10 years. So I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
So I think that in addition to being a superintendent, you've also been an adjunct professor at the university level. Are you still doing that work?
No, I started with Concordia University in 2007, and then this year I decided to take a break. So I'm no longer teaching in the EDD program, but I am serving on dissertation committees. I just got a little tired, and so just needed to pare down a little bit. So I decided to stay active with committees, but not actively teach.
That's what we do as leaders, right? We always overextend and then we have to kind of catch ourselves, pull back, and figure out where we're going to be focused for the next few years. I am really excited about the kind of things you're focused on locally in California, but also nationally. It's been fun to watch your work. So here's what's really fun is we met, but we didn't meet, right? We met on the stage of a conference called Leading While Female. And each of us were able to have like this 5 minute TED Talk like program where we told our stories. And after I heard you talk, I knew I had to expose your story. I need to tell more people your story. So I'm glad that you are willing to share your story because you're an important and prominent leader nationally. And I want everyone to know you.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you for that, Christina. I appreciate that.
Did you have fun doing that? I mean, I certainly did.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And telling your story in 5 minutes is quite a challenge, but it's also quite empowering because you just select the most critical moments. And I feel very fortunate because someone recorded that and then sent it to me. And so it's something very private. It was for the people, to me, it was for the people in the room and then me to be able to share with people. But it's nice to look back and because when you're in the moment, I don't know. I don't know how you felt, but you're just in the moment, right? Like you're on a stage. But then looking back and watching it, you can see where you made people laugh. You can see where you made people gasp. You can see where you made people clap. So it's kind of been fun to just watch it afterwards and experience it as a viewer and not as a deliverer. So it was a powerful experience, right? To watch all of the women, not perform, but perform their story. And it was empowering to be able to do that as well.
But it's what was, I think, also powerful is that we all showed up. I think we had this fixed amount of time to tell our story. And we all just kind of got into that moment and showed up, I think, authentically. It was really powerful. And so I really enjoyed everyone's story. I like to talk a little bit about where you're leading now and what your story looks like as it's unraveled around 30 years or so of service in public education to superintendency. You've been in the classroom, you're leading nationally. In fact, your work led you to be invited last year to be a speaker for Pride by the Beach. And I am wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that and what has it been like since then? Has anything changed since that keynote?
That was a complete honor. I was invited by the North County LGBT Center here in Oceanside to be the keynote speaker at their annual Pride by the Beach celebration. And at first I was just like, oh my God, why are you asking me? What am I possibly going to say? And then literally I was listening to music and a Kelly Clarkson song came on called Invincible. And as she was singing the lyrics, I was just like, oh, this is what I have to talk about. That as people and especially LGBT people, I think right now in this time frame that we're in and completely under attack, and groups out there trying to remove some of the rights that we do have. And I needed to talk about how people can come at us, but ultimately we're invincible. and not from a space of, I know we're all going to, our lives end, but you're not going to end my life with your hatred, with your lack of understanding, with your purposeful destruction of who I am as a person. I just feel invincible in that way. I really do. And I think that I wanted to empower our students. I wanted to empower our community. And as long as we stick together and continue to value ourselves and our community as people, we are invincible. So that was the message. And so what has changed since? Well, there's a lot more bills in the legislature throughout the country trying to remove our rights. There's a lot more opposition to books about and written by LGBT people and characters and experiences and lives. And I think that the fervor out there of hatred and misunderstanding and just down, I just can't call it anything other than hatred and misunderstanding, because that's what it is, completely, of the LGBT community and the LGBT experience. And I think that, nothing has changed for me personally, really, with that, other than I think, locally here in our district, there's been a more concerted effort to attack me personally as the superintendent. And what's interesting is people, the people that come and try to attack. So it's not about, the LGBT part, but I'm like, well, then what is it about? Because I'm the same person that I've been, but now that I'm even more open than I have been in the last decade, there's really not other reasons. The district is doing very well. So, I think that's been a change. But it's interesting. It bothers me and it doesn't, honestly, because I know that the attacks that I have to endure at our board meetings by small-minded people is nothing compared to what students experience. And I think that young children are still experiencing and going through, and as much work as we've done in Oceanside, I know that they're still having experiences that are, and that are imperfect. And I know we all do, right? Like we all have challenges. All kids have challenges, no matter how you present yourself. But we're really working to try and ensure that our schools are safe and affirming places for all kids, with a special call out to our LGBT students, because they're an invisible subgroup, right? You don't just know that someone is LGBT by looking at them. You cannot just tell. And so if we create respectful and inclusive environments for all people, then all kids will have great experiences, right? And that's what we want. So I'm happy to take, the arrows at the board meeting, whatever, because I'll just be a model for our kids that resilience and strength and conviction and belief in who you are will always win out over hatred and misunderstanding and misguided people.
Well, it's interesting because if you really lean into the equity work, you're gonna confront, right, this pushback by those who have a certain way in which they think everything has to occur, right, and everyone needs to follow. But you made this comment about the rights of the LGBTQ community being rolled back or attempts at it, and yet we're talking about rights that are basic rights around humanity, the ability to read about your story, the ability to tell your story, the ability to love, the ability to come together and have discourse, the ability to learn in a safe environment. Those are all basic human rights that every person, certainly every child in our public school system, should fundamentally have a right to and should feel safe around. What are students saying to you? How are students engaging in this narrative today at Oceanside?
Well, I've been very impressed by our students. So a couple of experiences. So, the book banning conversation has, reached our board meetings, and one of our groups of students out of school, and I'm not saying they're all in the community because I don't know if they were, if they weren't, but they came to our board meeting. About 12 kids from one of our high schools came to a board meeting, and talked about book banning, and they read some of the books that were on the list, and they gave their thoughtful opinions about why the books should or should not be removed from their libraries. And most of them said that the books should not be removed. They're like, look, these aren't required readings. We have the option to check them out. If the goal of education is to educate us about the world in which we live, why would you remove books that help us understand our world? Like, adults, you might be narrow-minded, but we are not. And we know through the research that's provided, right? Like the generations, like I'm Generation X. And so the millennials and the Zers that are after us, they are much more open-minded. And with each generation, all the way from, the boomers and I forget the one before them right now. But with each generation that's coming to be, they're more open-minded and more affirming. And students are understanding themselves at earlier ages, coming out at earlier ages. And I believe, although this is my opinion, it's not based on research, they're even a little bit more sophisticated, right? Because they have access to more information and really a more diverse world than certainly I did growing up in the 70s and the 80s, where truly our information was television, magazines, newspapers. Right. And the television representation and the representation in movies, I mean, it was really all straight white people. That's really what it was, right? There wasn't a lot of people of color unless it was very stereotyped. And there certainly weren't any LGBT characters to be found. And artists weren't out, right? And public people weren't out. And now we have politicians that are out. We have singers and entertainers and actors and actresses that are out and verbal and affirming about who they are. So kids have more information, and seeing these people that they might admire or look up to. We even have some athletes out there, right, that are out and affirming. And so all of that information and visualization about, God, it's okay to be this way, I think is helping them be more sophisticated and understand themselves at a lot earlier ages than some of the prior generations. So I've been very impressed with how they are handling the conversation about books. And when I visit our GSAs, which are, groups on campus that support lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender students, and they really just thank me. They thank me, one, for being out, and two, they thank me for working to provide the safe space. And they love their teachers that are their advisors that meet with them. Either most of them meet weekly, and they just have a lunch and a safe space to talk. And what they say is, we thank our teacher for providing this space, because we know in here we can just be who we are, and we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be ridiculed. And look around, there's a lot of us. And, this is fun to know each other and to know who we are. And, I go there to show them our support, all the way from the Board of Education to the superintendent, to the cabinet, to the principals. But what they end up showing me is their support of me. Like, they inspire me, because they just say thank you. Like, thank you, because we know you care, and we feel good at our school, and we're going to continue trying to ensure that our schools are safe and affirming places. That's empowering, that kids take the ownership to do that for their school. So I've been very, very proud of our students and our staff, and the staff that is engaged in this work and embraced this work. And also the staff, that they might be struggling for one reason or another, but they're asking questions, and they do care about building safe and affirming schools. And that's the bottom line, right? That's really what we want to achieve. And that's really where our focus is.
So it's interesting when we talk about book banning, I always tell folks, book banning, just read the history, and it's happened for over, a century. And some of the stories are quite hysterical. Alice in Wonderland was banned because animals shouldn't be talking. And so, read some of the history, and also read the fact that sometimes when we try to restrict and ban and take away the voice of any groups, we find that the opposite happens. There's just a unification of voice, there's a unification around, look, we need to be a community that's conversing around these hard topics and conversing through discomfort, right? There's nothing more important in the equity work than being grounded in the fact that we have to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Because again, we are all learners, right? We're all developing, we're all learning how to appreciate one another, how to have compassion, how to live in love, how to live in community. And the field and the work of public education is absolutely amazing because of that, but it's also been hard in some of the public policy work as you've described. So you are not only doing the work in district with your students, with your community, with your board, but you're also doing work at the national level, bringing this conversation to a broader audience. And so you were more recently involved with AASA at an NCE conference, doing a session there. You also have an article about the work that you've done and the conversations you're opening up. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that national conversation level is so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very fortunate to be able to present at the NCE conference through AASA. I've also presented at the National School Board Association level to reach school board members, because I think both audiences are critical for different reasons. The school board level, I think, is critical at the national level, because they're the ones who make policies, right, for districts. And they're also the ones that hire superintendents. And so I want to help them be open-minded about, I don't represent all lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. I only represent myself. But like any of us from a community, we try to speak, about us as people so that we can create some level of understanding, right? Even though I know I do not speak for all people in the community. I understand that. But I try to help board members understand that ultimately it comes down to creating spaces for kids. Like, that's what I care about most, is that kids feel safe, and staff as well, by the way. And I know that right now in this country, that is just not the case because of what is happening in different states throughout the country. But I also try to open their mind to hiring gay superintendents. And I talk about how, for most of my career, I was actually not an out person, right? I hid who I was because I knew I wouldn't be hired. I didn't feel that I would be promoted or hired in the districts where I was serving. And then when I decided to be a superintendent, I really felt that I needed to be out because I needed my board to be able to trust me and never think that I was hiding something from them. And when you're in the closet, at least through my experience, I always felt not completely authentic with people. And I'm a very authentic, forthright person, and I just didn't want to have that thing. Plus, I'm older, I'm more impatient, I'm in a beautiful relationship, and I'm like, I can't hide this person. I love her, and we need to be in the community and do events, and so I needed to be out. So by telling that story, I'm hoping that board members understand that we're just people like everybody else, and that we have qualifications just like everybody else, and it's okay to hire us as people. I still think it's a very difficult sell. I think it's a difficult sell to search firms, which is very frustrating to me because they are the gatekeepers. But then, I can go down a rabbit hole on that one. But with AASA, the audience is predominantly superintendents and assistant superintendents. And I really try to provide strategies all the way from board policies to what kind of language you use on forms so that you can create safe and affirming spaces, right? All the way from being very vocal and loud, like yesterday was June 1st. And here at our district for the third year, we raised the Pride Progress flag, which we are very happy to do. My Board of Education is all about it. But if you read news articles today, it's controversial. Throughout San Diego County, throughout the state of California, throughout the country, there's controversy. In fact, today in LAUSD, there was, I'm going to call it a protest with like a mini, not good things happening between parents who were protesting a pride assembly at an elementary school. And like, it just makes no sense to me. I'm like, what a beautiful idea that they do an assembly that's safe and affirming for the most, well, I think one of the most hidden and ridiculed and belittled populations, so that they show that, hey, if you have, two moms or two dads, or, an uncle that's married to a man, whatever the situation, like, we honor you and we love you, and this is Pride Month and we want to talk about you. But that became controversial because people didn't want their kids to be exposed to that. And my question is, exposed to what? I'm pretty certain they weren't going to make it about sexual education, but we're constantly sexualized as people. Like, that's all we're going to talk about, is what we do in the privacy of our homes. And I can tell you, Christina, in all of my presentations, I have never once talked about what I do in the privacy of my home. I talk about what we can do in schools to create safe spaces for kids, right? All the way from how we language our forms, instead of saying mother, father, that we can put relationship to student, right? So we honor same gender households, or grandparent households, or aunts, uncles, sisters, siblings, right? Families, I don't think they've ever been mother, father, but they certainly aren't now. There's a lot of different constructs for families. So board policies, education programs, so many things that can be done. So I think that's why it's important nationally to speak. And what really motivated me to start doing that is I noticed that there weren't sessions about this topic. And I noticed that about a decade ago. And I just kind of looked around and I was like, well, someone needs to do a session about this. This is important. This is an important conversation. And then I just said, well, Julie, no one's doing it. So if not you, then who? And that was the first name of my first session that I presented. And I since then, it's wonderful. There have been other folks presenting, and I've done locally in our California school boards. I've presented with other board members and found a group of out board members. We presented one year. I found that very empowering, and I found another gay superintendent, and we did a panel with all of us so that we could talk about that experience and what we can do for kids. So I've done it in all different kinds of formats, and I will continue to do it. And still, I'm going to tell you, there's still not a lot of presentations on this topic. I'm proud to see that there's more, but for a national conference, there might be me and one other. For a national conference of thousands of superintendents coming together. And right now, especially when it's so critical that we talk about how to support kids, I worry about what's happening in other states. In California, our ed code absolutely states clearly that we need to do this work. And in Oceanside, we're not doing anything beyond ed code. We're just doing what's required in ed code. But I'm worried that still districts are not in California doing what's required by ed code, and certainly not throughout the country.
So certainly the work that you are doing, while limited in terms of there should be many other kind of sessions like this, makes a difference for kids when they see you presenting and talking about these issues and not hiding from it, not hiding the issue, right? Which we do a lot in matters of acceptance and equity and inclusivity. And one of the data points you often bring up is the percentage, over 80% of students who are part of the LGBTQ or LGBTQIA community not feeling safe. And so they elect not to be involved in certain spaces or elect not to be involved in certain conversations. And that certainly must have an effect and an impact on their own learning opportunities.
Oh, absolutely, right? I mean, your level of safety is directly related to how you're going to perform in school. And I even talk about this in terms of adults. And there's a study that the Human Rights Campaign did, and they surveyed adults about how their level of outness at work and why they might leave the workplace. And the study is called, or well, it wasn't really a study, but I think it was more of interviews and surveys. It's called The Workplace Divided. And it basically talks about the experience of LGBT people in the workplace, right? And still 46% of people surveyed hide who they are at work. And 26% stay because the environment was accepting, and 10% leave because it wasn't an accepting environment. And the Human Rights Campaign has done really good work around two things, not only businesses, but also communities. And they have what they call the Municipal Equality Index. And you can literally go onto their website and plug in your city and see what the score is in your city. So it's about services for the LGBT community and benefits offered through local governments and whatnot. And I'm proud to say that Oceanside has a score of 100 out of 100. So, but I talk about that in my presentation as well, so people know that, hey, you can actually move to a more affirming city. And there are companies that are more affirming that you could work for and also, give your business to, because there are many companies that are very anti-LGBT and support legislation that is anti-LGBT. And I think it's important that as members of the community, we're informed about that so that we don't give those businesses our dollars.
Well, I love you bringing in the whole economic impact side of this and the economic power, right, that communities have. And we can go down that rabbit hole and talk about that for the next few hours. But it is about bringing awareness to communities about, who they patronize, right? So don't leave your money, your resources, that power that you have with organizations that are not embracing and inclusive of communities. So I really appreciate that. I love to kind of wrap up. I can talk to you all day. You have such a powerful story to tell, and I appreciate that you're willing to tell it and to be part of these conversations and a leader for this work about inclusivity for all of our kids, our staff, our community. I guess, I have to do the aside. You're talking about the economic power. I also, on the church side, we know that churches are very divided, and often worship happens very in divisive ways. And we have to be willing to have these conversations across what's happening at home, kids not feeling safe to come out to their families, kids not feeling safe at a church of worship that they go to their families, and then going to school and not feeling safe, right? And so there's a lot to discuss here. I would love to get your thoughts on two final questions. One is, we've had a lot of public conversations around pronouns and whether folks are comfortable with thinking in a non-binary manner, but as a woman who's running a equity-based woman organization by women for women, we're getting some new questions. It's interesting. The question is, so what is a woman? When you talk about being a woman serving organization. But interestingly, I share that we have never gotten the question, what is a man? And I wonder how you, in all your experiences, would answer that question. Or would you even answer it?
Yeah, I don't think I would. I can address the pronoun question, and I address this when I present. Pronouns are very important to this generation. In my generation, as we were growing up, and I would say, even now, and again, it's only to the friends that I have and exposure to, we don't introduce ourselves with our pronouns, but kids do. And when I go and visit their GSAs, I have to think about, okay, how am I going to introduce myself? Because they say all the pronouns and all the things of how they identify because it's important to them. That's never been important to me. So, but I want people to understand, and there are a lot of resources that talk about that and go into, gender identity and beyond. And so, we honor that for our students. And as far as, what is a woman? I don't know. I have to be honest. I remember I was a brand new teacher at a high school, and I had these really phenomenal, female mentors that were wonderful, empowering women. And I remember, and I was probably, I don't know, 24 or 25. And I remember asking them, when am I going to feel like a woman? Like, when am I going to be like a woman, like grown? Because I, felt like such, I don't know, a kid, I guess you could say. But I have to be honest with you. I mean, I'm 54 and I'm still asking that question. I feel like I'm a very new soul on this earth. I'm very kid-like. I have a lot of energy. I'm very playful, and so I don't know if I'll ever, have whatever that feeling is. So I don't. I can't answer that question because I can't even really, answer it for myself. And I don't. It's not something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I just know, I'm a woman, and I present as a woman. I identify as a woman. And I think it can be complicated if we make it complicated, or it can be simple if we make it simple. And I actually think what it comes down to is just affirming people for who they are and accepting them from who they are. And even though we may not understand it, whatever that means, it's just about affirming people. Like, that's it, right? Like, I cannot get caught up in race. I cannot get caught up in religion. I cannot get caught up in gender identity. I cannot get caught up in sexual orientation, because the bottom line is we're all just human, right? And these other things that we have that we use to identify ourselves, to separate ourselves, they're just things, right? Like, I don't know, like, if you just remove all these constructs that we've developed over time, we would all just be human. And I think we wouldn't see those differences, right? We've created those differences. We've created those. I think that they don't exist. I think we're all just people trying to get along and live our best life. And why would we stop anyone from doing that? And that's just the message that we have around our equity work is, we've created all these things. We're just human. Like, let's just enjoy that and love that and honor that about our people. And I think if we can do that in our district, and if we can do that as people, we'd be a lot better off than all this hatred and mindless separation and angst and anger that we have.
So Dr. Julie Vitale, or Vitale, as I would say in Espanol, I am thrilled to have had this opportunity to have a conversation with you today. I think this is a great place to stop. Your message is just so on point. I love that you describe yourself as someone who's fun. I saw that when I first heard you talk. You're serious about your work, but you're also not too serious about just enjoying life and enjoying yourself and not taking yourself so seriously. I don't take myself very seriously, but I'm serious about this equity work. And I knew that's why we connected. And so I am excited about your leadership at Oceanside. I'm excited about what the board and the community is leaning into. There's more work to do in Oceanside and nationally. But I thank you for your leadership. I thank you for representing opportunities and opening up opportunities for students to authentically have their own space for their own voice, to be themselves. And I also appreciate that you walk into a room and you're your own self. Like I say, when you meet me, you get what you get, because this is who I am and I'm not going to be anyone else. And I appreciate you for coming into rooms and getting to a point in your life where you say, like you said, you're in your 50s and I am who I am. And so thank you, because that's what we need to hear from our leaders today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed the conversation. And, my bottom line is I don't want kids to have to like live their life with not being who they are until they're in their 40s. I want them to be able to do that in their teen years, right? In their 20s and their whole life, because I think it makes for a brighter life. So, I plan on continuing the work, and I know that you and your organization will continue it as well, and we'll fight the good fight. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Julie.